Hello and welcome to AIDS United's webinar, Strengthening Human Resources Infrastructure for HIV Organizations. This is the first in a three-part series. Just to note, this webinar is in listen-only mode. You can listen over your computer speakers or you can call the number on your screen. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar, please use the chat function. It's on the lower left of your screen. You'll see that little blue circle. You can send us a question and we'll either chat back to you or hold the question to respond during the Q&A section of the webinar. This webinar is also being recorded. The recording will be made available later today at aidsunited.org/webinars. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn the webinar over to our two presenters from the AIDS United Getting to Zero Capacity Building Assistance team, Adrian and Teresa.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. I want to thank you all for attending the AIDS United Human Resources Management Series. My name is Adrian Neal Jr. I'm come from AIDS United as a capacity building specialist. And then I will allow Teresa to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Teresa, and I am the Capacity Building Coordinator at AIDS United.
Awesome. So again, thank you so much for attending this webinar. We are really excited to be able to share some key information with you as relates to human resources management. We know that oftentimes CBOs aren't able to really be able to do all the HR functions that are under the human resources umbrella. So we were able to come to key functions that we think are necessary for every CBO, no matter the capacity, no matter the size, to implement that could really help you move forward and help you be successful as it relates to the goals and things that you have set forth for your organization. So without further ado, we're going to go and we're going to talk a little bit about AIDS United and our capacity building team. So AIDS United, for those who do not know, we have three pillars: capacity building, policy and advocacy, and grant making. Our policy and advocacy side, we have folks on our policy team that are on the Hill every day fighting on behalf of those who are affected and infected with HIV, as well as, doing some work around social justice, race, and things of that nature. Our grant making side, basically what it sounds like, we develop grants and fund CBOs around the country to be able to do the great work that you all are doing within your communities. And then the capacity building side of things, which is the team that I and Teresa are on, we develop and implement trainings for CBOs around the country, things around leadership development, human resources, communication, conflict management, and all those wonderful things to be able to help you do the work and help you develop the tools necessary to do the work that you do within your communities. If you are in need of capacity building assistance, Teresa will talk about how you can go about that towards the end of this webinar, and how to apply for capacity building assistance, what exactly it is, and things of that nature, and be able to answer any questions that you have as it relates to that. There are a few terms that we are going to, or that you may hear throughout the webinar, that we kind of want to briefly go over. This list will actually be at the beginning of each webinar that you'll be on. So if you are signed up for all three webinars, which I hope you are, you will see these terms throughout the series. So the first one is EEO, which is Equal Employment Opportunity. Second one, EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. HR, Human Resources, HRM, Human Resources Management. SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management. I do want to point out SHRM. SHRM is a great resource if you either want things, tools to help you out with human resources strategy or plans that you're trying to implement, or if you want examples or anything of that nature. SHRM is a great resource. There are things that you can get without paying the membership fee, but if you want everything that it has to offer, there is a membership fee that you do need to pay, but it is definitely worth it. JD is a job description, so we'll be talking about job descriptions. A term that many of you all are familiar with is PLWH, people living with HIV, and then KSA, knowledge, skills, and abilities. So as I stated earlier, these are some key terms that you'll definitely be hearing as we move forward with the webinar series. So just a webinar outline. The first one is kind of going to be a review of human resources management, right? Or not a review, an overview. And we're going to just talk about what exactly it is, the key functions that we're going to be focusing on, and as well as some of the other functions that fall under human resources management. And then we're going to explain some guiding principles as we go along through this first webinar. The second webinar is when we're really going to the second part is when we're going to really introduce the key HR functions. So the best practice for recruitment and interviewing, and then as well as key practices or best practices for onboarding. For the learning objectives for this webinar, by the end, participants will be able to understand key terms relevant to human resources management, identify human resources management guiding principles and key functions relevant to CBOs, and obtain resources to inform and improve their recruitment, interviewing, and onboarding processes. So before we go straight into the webinar, there is a question that Teresa is going to take you or pose to you all, and then we'll get started with the rest of the webinar.
Hey, everyone. So the question for you all is, what comes to mind when you think of whom? So please respond to them, and I'll be sure to read them out. Okay, we got a response. The first one is headache. Okay. Don't be shy. Employee planning. Okay, thank you. Hiring and firing, training, thank you. Something for large organizations. Harm reduction management. So many questions, so many answers. Acquiring the best talent based on your organization, absolutely. Okay, great. I'm going to leave the poll open for about 1 more minute, so please get your answers in, and we will see the results.
Okay, Adrienne, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. So some of the responses that we saw, I'm actually going to read a few. I definitely understand whoever put headache. Human resources management can be a headache, but it can definitely be a good headache at times, right? So it is definitely a necessary evil. Some other responses that I saw were employee planning, and this is actually very important. Especially when you're talking about evaluations, when you're talking about goal setting, when you're talking about professional development for staff and employees. So definitely yes. Hiring and firing / training, definitely. So human resources, that is the biggest thing people think of when they think of HR is that hiring piece, right? That recruitment, that doing the interview, getting the job description prepared, offering the job, that onboarding piece, definitely all things that we'll be talking about. And even with termination, definitely making sure that we are going about the proper way to terminate folks or discipline individuals, making sure that we're doing it in a way that, protects the agency, but also doing it in a way or making sure that we're doing all that we can before we even get to the termination piece, right? So are we putting the employee on a corrective action plan? Are we really looking at, was it, maybe the fault of the organization? Did we miss something? Or, was it just due to the employee, not doing the work that they're supposed to be doing in the manner that they're supposed to be doing it in? Some other things that came across was harm reduction management. Somebody said something for large organizations. And so one of the things that we really thought about before developing this webinar is making sure that we could do things, or making sure that the content that we give and the functions that we picked out are things that small organizations can do. So not just large organizations. And when you think of large organizations, definitely the HR, there's actually like an HR department, right? And it's on a much larger scale. But we were able to narrow down some key things that any organization, no matter the size or the capacity, that you could really implement and move forward with. And then just a few more things, the management of human resources and acquiring the best talent based on your organization. So I want to thank you, everyone, for participating in this poll, and we are going to move forward with the webinar. And there was a concern about me not speaking loud enough. I just wanted to check in to make sure everyone can hear me. So I'm not sure how we can do that.
If you're having trouble hearing Adrian, you can use the chat function on the bottom left to let us know if you are having any difficulties hearing. Thanks.
And I'll definitely make sure I do my best to speak up and speak clearly. So what is human resources management? Essentially, human resources management is people management. And so what the definition we are going to utilize for the webinar series is a management function concerned with hiring, motivating, and maintaining people in an organization. Right, so again, the management of people. So what we're really talking about is how can we empower, how can we develop, how can we really utilize the individuals that are working for us in a way that's going to ensure that we are successful, in a way that's going to ensure that we're moving forward and make sure that we are meeting the needs of our community, as well as making sure that we're functioning well as an organization, right? And oftentimes, we are so focused on, community members, and we're so focused on, making sure we're offering testing and we're offering all these services that at times we may, forget to think about, the people that are, doing the work, right? The people who are, actually doing the testing, the people who are writing the grants and thinking about their needs and their professional development and their self-care and things of that nature. And so when we think of human resources management, it's really about managing the people, right? Making sure that people are doing what they need to do and making sure that they have the necessary tools and skill sets to be able to do their job in a way that is going to ensure that the community has what they need as well. So some human resources guiding principles that we have are, the first one, people are the most important assets of an organization. An organization cannot be successful without effectively managing resources. Number two, personnel policies and procedures are closely linked with the achievement of the organization's objectives and mission. And number three, HR's responsibility is to find, secure, guide, and develop employees whose talents and desires are compatible with the operating needs and future goals of the organization. So these are three HR guiding principles that we felt as though each organization or every organization can kind of lean upon to help drive their human resources functions, right? I kind of want to go over them a little bit more in depth. So the first one, people are the most important assets of an organization. Without the people at the organization, we would not be able to do the work that we do, right? Without them, we would not be able to offer all the testing. We would not be able to do all the research. We would not be able to do all that we need to do to better serve our communities without the people. So to be able to effectively manage this resource is truly important. Personnel policies and procedures, oftentimes when we go into nonprofits, something that we do see, and it's just because of the capacity and the nature of the work, is that there may not be a lot of policies or not a lot of investment in creating structured policies to ensure that there is some type of documentation that is easily accessible for people to use as a guide, right? And so that could look at policies that may be around de-escalation between a client and an employee, or policies around if you have employees who work from home or who telework, policies around that, policies around, evaluation, performance evaluations for employees, policies around, what does disciplinary actions look like within the organization, right? So those are some of the important policies and procedures that we really want to make sure that we have a place, and also they align with the achievement of the organization's objectives and mission, and really making sure that each policy that you develop is aligned with that mission and it doesn't go astray, right? And then HR's responsibility is to find, secure, guide, and develop employees whose talents and desires are compatible with the operating needs and future goals of the organization. I always advise organizations to not necessarily hire for the now, but hire for the future. And I definitely know that's hard, especially if you have somebody who maybe quit, or maybe you had to let someone go and you have to fill that spot as soon as possible because you're worried about, meeting a certain amount of numbers. You're worried about making sure you have somebody to go to this event to test, making sure you have somebody to go represent the CBO at this event, right? It's just the nature of the work. But when you hire for the future, you're really ensuring that you are making sure, or you're really ensuring that the individual that you're hiring is going to be able to sustain within that position, and really going to be able to even sustain outside of the grant or whatever confinements that there are, or confinements that they've been hired under, right? And so you're not just hiring them, okay, well, we just need a tester, so we're going to hire a tester for now, but you're really looking in the future. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move into the hiring piece of the webinar. But these are 3 guiding principles that we definitely encourage organizations to lean upon as they're thinking about human resources moving forward. Some key HR functions, or not key HR functions, but some functions that fall under HR are recruitment, selection, placement, onboarding, and promotion. These are all things that I'm sure you all are familiar with when we're talking about recruitment. Where are you recruiting new hires? Are you just going to LinkedIn? Are you going to universities? Are you using community liaisons? Are you using the current staff that you have on board? Are you recruiting internally instead of externally all the time? Are you invested in your onboarding process? And what does your onboarding process look like? Is it actually an onboarding plan or process, or is it just simply somebody coming in, all right, well, here you go, here's your paperwork, fill this out, all right, let's get you in your new position, and there's really no real conversation about the employee's goals, about the expectations, et cetera. Are you promoting within, and what does that look like? Is there an actual process, and is it something that is looks the same across the entirety of the organization? Performance appraisal, training, and development. So do you actually have a performance appraisal plan or process? Are you actually evaluating staff, and how often are you evaluating staff? Are you using the evaluations to help inform goals? Are you using the evaluation to make sure that even the organization is on track to meeting its goal and its mission? Are you training staff? Are you using the performance appraisal process to figure out what trainings need to be implemented for staff? Are you, developing staff outside of maybe of their job title or position? So, for example, if you have an outreach worker, who desires to work in finance, I don't know, are you offering any types of trainings to that staff member that can help them develop their finance goal or their finance desire to eventually maybe even promote them into that position eventually, right? Health and safety and risk management, record keeping, labor relations, grievances, discipline, wages and salaries and bonuses, and more. These are all things that fall under the human resources, and there is so much more. It's not just these key things, but the first functions that we're really going to be focusing on for this webinar series is the first bullet point, which is recruitment, selection, placement, onboarding. Those are things that we're really going to hit on, and there may be some small conversations around training and development, et cetera. And so we have another poll, and I will hand it off to Teresa.
Hey, Teresa, you may be on mute. There you go.
Who is responsible for HR functions in your organization, and what top 5 HR functions do you currently implement? All right, the first one. Who is responsible for HR functions in your organization? And we will move forward from this in a little bit. Please submit your answers. And then next, what top 5 HR functions do you currently implement? Perfect. Just a couple more moments for folks to submit some questions, and I'll pass it on to Adrian. Okay. All right, Adrian, it's on you.
Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you everyone for responding. So the biggest one that I see is hiring. I see someone put hiring for the future. Amazing. And then I also see payroll, interviewing, job posting, benefits management. Someone stated they personally do not implement any. So thank you for your responses. Again, hiring is definitely something that we will be talking about, as well as interviewing, just the whole recruitment process. And then as it relates to performance assessment, those are definitely things that we can talk about as it relates to one-on-one TA. So key HR functions. The first one we are going to talk about is recruitment. So although recruiting, assessing and hiring the right people can be time-consuming and challenging process, doing so pays off in terms of employee productivity, morale, and retention. A structured selection process will help make sure that you are making a productive hiring decision, right? And so, making sure you're inviting a diverse applicant pool, right? And not diverse just in, race, gender, age, etc., but diverse even when it comes to experience, diverse when it comes to background, and things of that nature, because those things also are important. Not necessarily hiring out of convenience. And what we mean by that is hiring, okay, well, we need a tester, and so I know, my good friend knows how to test. They've done it for 5 years, so we're just going to bring that person in, right? Instead of actually going through the necessary process and making sure that you're choosing the best candidate for that role in that position. And then also it saves the organization money when you are making sure that you're investing in recruitment or a proper recruitment process or strategy. And so, it ends up costing the organization money if you have to keep hiring or letting someone go, then hire, or someone quits and then hire. Every time you have to hire someone, it costs the organization money. So to create a structured and informed recruitment process, will be able to save the organization money in the long run. So why focus on recruitment? Reduces turnover, ensures that the person matches the need, increase employee morale, and creates a positive employee relationship. So reducing turnover. We all know that in nonprofit, turnover is bound to happen, right? And it happens all the time when either it's somebody being promoted or someone going to a different agency, or in the unfortunate times, we've had to let someone go. Turnover, is just something that we cannot stop completely. But how can we reduce the turnover? That actually starts at the recruitment process, right? So ensuring that you're, putting the right person in the right position. Making sure that the qualifications and the experience match, making sure that you are doing your due diligence and going through the proper interviewing process. So are you asking the right questions? Are you asking informed questions? Are you, having individuals submit some type of writing sample. For example, if they are going to be the communications director, are you having them submit a press release that they've had to write in the past? Are you having them, do certain tests or answer certain questions or surveys that's going to give you a better idea of how they will act or how they will do a certain role or task? Are you creating a job description in the correct way, in the correct manner, and those types of things, right? And then when you're talking about onboarding, which we'll get into later on, what types of things are you doing to ensure that the employee has what they need? Do they have the necessary equipment? Do they have the proper computer? Do they have the proper testing kits? Whatever essential things that they need to be able to do their job, do they have that? And then create a positive employer and employee relationship. All these things are reasons as to why you should focus on recruitment. And going the recruitment process, identifying the need. So what is it, what are the needs within the organization that you have, right? Making sure that you think about that process or think about that before you even start posting to the job, right? Making sure you know exactly what the organization needs. Develop a position description, so a job description with the key functions and things that the individual, the employee will be doing, as well as a description of, a brief description of the organization. Also, and we'll be talking about what to put in a job description even more, but, maybe even putting the salary range, right? So you're not wasting time if you know that the job can only pay $35,000 to $40,000 per year, making sure that you're getting candidates that are okay with that type of salary range, right? And not going through the whole interviewing process and getting towards the end to make the offer, and then the employee says, or the possible employee says, oh, actually, I think I want about $50,000 to $55,000, and you are telling that employee, well, unfortunately, we can't do that. Now you kind of have to revisit that recruitment or hiring process all over again. Determine the hiring team. So who exactly is going to be on that team? Who will the employee have a direct contact with? Who will the employee have indirect contact with? And we'll also be talking about having, who specifically to have on that team. For example, maybe even having somebody who is of the community that the person will be working with. And we'll talk about what that looks like as well. Advertising the position. Where are you advertising? Are you advertising it in places that are going to bring you a diverse applicant pool? Or are you only advertising in places that are only going to bring you a pool of applicants that have masters or PhDs and maybe not necessarily the experience that is needed working with a certain population or community? Reviewing applications, interviewing the applicants, and then finally selecting the candidate. You definitely want to make sure that your recruitment process reflects the culture, values, and expectations of the organization. How the organization conducts this process sets the tone for the entire relationship between the employee and the employer. So this process is very, very important. The core elements of recruitment reflect position requirements and organizational values, include creative and accessible methods to attract diverse candidates, documented in organizational policies and procedures, reflect staff input and best practices in the field, and revised and updated annually. There are a few things that I want to point out on this slide, and the first one is documented in organizational policies and procedures. And so what we mean by this is that we know that every recruitment process, depending on the position you are recruiting for, is going to look different, right? So your recruitment process for a CFO may look totally different than your process for an outreach specialist or a testing coordinator or maybe even a program manager. And so, but there needs to be some type of consistency, and what that could look like is, 5 basic key questions that are asked no matter who, 5 basic key questions within the interviewing process that are being asked no matter what the position is, right? And so basically, things like, what are your time management skills like? What is your organizational skills like? Questions that get to those types of things. Those types of things as it relates to 5 key questions should look the same across the board. And then, the more, not the more, but the difference of position will determine what other questions that are position specific that you should ask moving forward in the interviewing process. But we want to emphasize documenting these things to make sure that you're not repeating, or I'm sorry, not repeating, but you're not recreating the wheel, right? And so, this is a process, this is a formula that we have created that works, that no matter the department, no matter the position, needs to follow this formula when recruiting. Now, of course, it will look different just depending on the position. It may look a little different, but there are some key things that need to remain the same. And then also revise and update it annually, right? So making sure that it is still relevant. The recruitment process or plan that you have put in place is still relevant as it relates to, where you're posting the job, the type of questions that you're asking. So these are just key elements that need to be focused on when we're talking about recruitment. An HR tip that we wanted to give to folks is important to understand federal and local laws when it comes to your employees, and a good resource for that is the U.S. Office of Personnel Management website. So this is a website where you can get some guidance on, what policies need to be implemented, or what policies need to be had at your organization to make sure that you're following whatever laws or guidelines that are set forth locally, state level, and federally. And so we're going to get into the next part, which is the interviewing portion of human resources management. And as I stated at the beginning of the webinar, this is just going to be a brief introduction to everything. So there may be some questions that people have as we move forward that will ask us to get a little more in depth about these topics, but as we get into webinar 2, that's when we'll really be diving a little bit deeper and having a little bit more conversation about, exactly how to go about these processes or these functions. But when we're talking about interviewing, why do you want to conduct an interview? It allows both the organization and candidate to assess the fit, demonstrates impartiality, and develops relationship with strong candidates for future opportunities. So when we say allow both organization and candidate to assess the fit, not only are you interviewing the candidate, but the candidate is also interviewing you, right? So it's not just you looking for the right candidate. Okay, who can we get to fill this position? Are they going to be able to communicate with community on a certain level? Are they going to be able to write this grant? Are they going to be able to do these deliverables? We just need the right, perfect person for this position. That candidate is also thinking, is this the right organization for me? Are they organized? Do they pay fairly? Do they operate in an organized manner? Or am I going to start this organization and they have no real policies, or they have no real guidance, or on day one I have nobody to talk to about the job that I'm supposed to be doing? Do they have an open door policy? Do they have certain benefits? Right? So these are all the things that the employee or the possible employee, the candidate, are thinking about as they're sitting in the interview with you as well, right? So it's not just about, you looking for the proper candidate, but it's also about them looking for the right organization. It's a mutual fit. Demonstrates impartiality, right? So when you go through the proper interviewing process, it helps to make sure that you're doing it in a fair way, right? And so you're not just, picking somebody off the street. All right, so I know Jason is going to be awesome because he's my friend and we go out for drinks every now and again, and he seems to have great conversations. So he'll be able to do this outreach role. No, right? It really makes sure that it really ensures that you are finding the right candidate for the role, right? And you're doing it in a way that's going to protect you. And so in case somebody comes up and says, hey, you only hired Jason because you two are friends or because you all went to college together, you'll be able to be like, no, we actually went through the interviewing process. Here are the questions that we asked. Here's the documentation. Here's his resume, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Develops relationship with strong candidates for future opportunities, right? And so a perfect example of this is, right, let's say that you interview 20 people. And out of 20 people, you narrowed it down to 5. Out of that 5, you finally found the one. Well, perhaps that 5 or that 20 were amazing candidates, right? But you just couldn't hire them because you couldn't find a position for them within the organization. Well, then you can keep those applications and even those interview documents on file. So when when you are ready to hire again, whether it's for that same position, hopefully it's not, but whether it's for that same position or a different position within the organization, then you'll be able to quickly go to, you know what, I remember we interviewed this great person named Rebecca. And Rebecca was amazing. She did an amazing interview. She had the qualifications. You know, she wasn't a fit for this position, but maybe she'll be a fit for this position in this department. Let's call her, let's re-interview her, and let's start this process with her again, right? And so it allows you to really have a strong relationship with the candidates. On the interviewing process, time limited with clear beginning and end, right? So making sure that you have a certain time frame that you want this process to be. So I'm not sure if you all have, but I know personally I've been in positions, or not in positions, but I've interviewed for positions to where it takes like 6 to 8 weeks before I hear back from a job, or it feels like it's taking that long, right? So you do the interview, they ask for your documentations, et cetera, and then you don't hear, or you find that you have to keep calling or keep emailing before you get any type of notification about the job, right? Before, like in your interviewing process, you want to think about the time frame of this process, and you even want to communicate that to the candidates and stick by that. If you tell them that they are going to have an answer by next Wednesday, making sure that you do as much as possible to make sure that you're staying within that time frame, right? Just out of respect for them as well. Guided by a formal interview tool. It's clear and accessible and standardized across departments and organizations. So this is what I was speaking to earlier when we first introduced recruitment, right? And so while many things will look different depending on the job and the department, et cetera, there are some things that should just be standard, right? So a standard 5 questions within the interview. You know, what are your organizational skills like? What's your time management skills like? You know, and more questions that we'll talk about as we dive a little bit deeper in the interview process. But there are some things that just should be standardized. The example or analogy that I like to give is, let's say you have a chocolate chip cookie recipe, right? And so your chocolate chip cookie recipe, you know that you need key things in this recipe. You know you need chocolate chips. You know you need some type of flour, and whether if it's going to be gluten-free flour, I'm not sure if they have gluten-free flour. But you know what I mean. Just depending on, or not depending on, but, you know, some type of flour. Then you know you need something to bake them in, et cetera, right? Those are things that you definitely need. You can't have chocolate chip cookies without chocolate chips. The things that can be changed or amended or tailored are how long you cook the chocolate chip cookie. Some people like their chocolate chip cookies very hard. Some people like their chocolate chip cookies soft, right? I personally like mine soft. So I may not cook my chocolate chip cookies as long. But those are types of things that can be tailored or amended. But key standardized things are like the chocolate chips. You need chocolate chips in your chocolate chip cookies. Now I want some chocolate chip cookies. And so, yes, these are just key things, or key things that definitely should be in your interviewing process. Interviewing core elements based on job description and candidate application materials. Follow a clear schedule and demonstrate respect for everyone's time. Documented and tailored to position functions. Impartial and confidential. We definitely talked about the impartial and making sure that it is confidential. We want to make sure that we're not, we want to make sure that the people who need to know the information about the candidate are the people who know, not everybody within the organization, right? Because that can get messy. Making sure that it's documented and tailored to position focus. So you want to make sure that, you know, what you're asking in the interview actually is aligned with the position, right? You're not asking, I don't know, you're not asking, you know, why is the sky blue if you are interviewing for a CEO, right? I mean, the sky being blue really has nothing to do with the position or with some of the functions that they are going to be doing, right? So making sure that you're staying aligned with the job description, I'm sorry, not the job description, but the job duties and functions. And making sure that you have a clear schedule and you're following that schedule, right? And what we mean by that, for example, is let's say, you're going to interview. All your interviews are going to take place on Monday and Tuesday. So you could, have Wednesday and Thursday and Friday to, talk with the rest of the interviewing team and have conversations and determine who's going to get the job. And then by that next Tuesday, you're ready to make an offer with the hopes that the offer will be accepted by Thursday, right? Just making sure that you have some type of schedule, clear schedule, to make sure that you're respecting everyone's time, especially the time of the candidate, right? Going back to what I was saying, making sure that the candidate knows and is updated on the process and, when they would possibly hear something, whether they receive a job or not. Another HR tip that we have, it is good practice to conduct an interview, even if engaged in an internal hire. So, some organizations, they may okay, well, you know what? Instead of us actually doing a whole interviewing process, what we're going to do is we're just going to bring Michael from Department A and just, bring him to Department B, and we're going to promote Jessica to his position. And we don't need to do interviewing because I know Michael, he already does great work, great things in his current department. Well, you still want to engage in some type of hiring process, some type of interviewing process, right? And because the reason you want to do that is to ensure that Michael is going to be able to do the job that he is being brought into correctly, right? So we know that Michael can do a great job in Department A. He's met his deliverables. He's making sure he's on track with whatever is set forth by the grant that he's on, et cetera. But Department B is a whole nother grant. It's a whole nother population. It's a whole nother set of deliverables. So we want to make sure that he has the capacity and the tools to be able to do that job. And not just make sure that he has the tools, but even maybe figure out what he may need, right? Because the interviewing process is also gathering that type of information. What exactly is the employee going to need to be able to do their job right? So making sure that we're figuring that information and not just bringing somebody into a job from another department within the organization just out of convenience, right? Because then that's also going to maybe look a little shady to some folks within the organization. The next piece we're going to talk about briefly is onboarding. Now, this is something that sometimes often gets missed within the organization, and it's due to just the job, right? Just the environment. Just working at nonprofit. We are tasked with doing so much. We have so many deliverables with grants. We have to do this event. We have to do that event. We have to get this out. We have to get that out. We have to see so many clients. We're doing all this great work, and sometimes we don't. We miss onboarding, and onboarding can be freaking amazing. And so when we think about onboarding, basically what it is like introducing your new hire to the organization, to their department, to the culture of the organization, introducing them to all that they're going to be doing and all that they should be excited about, right? It's an opportunity to give them a tour of the space. It's an opportunity to figure out what their goals are. It's an opportunity to, figure out how we can develop them. It's an opportunity maybe for us to get some feedback about, maybe what could have went better in the interviewing or recruitment process for them. It gives an opportunity for a relationship to be established between the employee and their boss or their manager. It's an opportunity for so many things, and it's a great setup to ensure the successfulness of that employee. And so we're going to talk about some small things now, but dive deeper in webinar 2. So onboarding. Why focus on onboarding? Again, it reduces turnover, increases employee morale, creates a positive employee-employee relationship, and clarifies job expectations. So after recruitment and selection, one of the most important ways that the organization can improve effectiveness is through the onboarding process, helping new hires to adjust social and performance aspects of the new jobs quickly and smoothly. Something I want to hit on is the last bullet point: clarify job expectations and objectives. I'm sure everyone hates it when they're just thrown into something. Like, right, you're just thrown in the water and then expected to swim. Nobody has taught you how to swim. Nobody has given you a cute little floaty device. Nobody has prepared you for the laps that you have to swim in this pool. And you start feeling like, oh my gosh, what is going on? I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know how to do this. I don't have the necessary tools. I don't have the equipment. I just don't know. I'm going to go crazy. No. We want to make sure that we've communicated clear expectations to our new hires. And we've actually heard their expectations of us. Because remember in the beginning when I said that you are just not hiring somebody great for the position, that person is also looking for a great organization to work for. So they have expectations. One of the biggest expectations is they may expect to be paid on time, right? That's a huge expectation. Another expectation is that they may expect to be professionally developed, right, beyond their role. Oftentimes, unfortunately, or not oftentimes, sometimes, unfortunately, we may hire people in a position and we hire for the now and we don't think about their professional development for the future, right? We don't think about how they could develop into a program manager. We don't think about how they could develop into a director. We don't think about how they can move from one department to the next department because we're hiring for the now. We're hiring that tester, that outreach person, or that program manager to get us through the now, right? And so when we're talking about expectations and objectives and even goals, this is a great opportunity to figure out what those are, to make sure that the employee feels as though we are invested in them as much as we expect them to be invested in the organization or the community that they are serving. The onboarding process, clearly defined and communicated beginning and the end, right? Strengths-based and collaborative. Educate new employees about the organizational culture and work environment. Inclusive and comprehensive. When we say inclusive, right, who should be involved in the onboarding process? Should it just be the HR representative? Should it be the HR representative and the person's program manager? Should it be the teammates or the colleagues that the person will be working with? So, for example, something that we do at Age United is that whenever we get somebody new, we have them speak to various people in different departments, right? Because even though they may not be working directly with that department or with that person, there may be some indirect work that may be happening, or if nothing else, that employee will be able to talk about that department when they go outside and they do outreach or they are at a conference or the case may be, right? So even though I work in capacity building, I'm able to talk about grant making in depth. I'm able to talk about policy and our policy and advocacy team in depth, and that's because I had the opportunity to have conversations and to learn more about those departments when I was first hired on. And that's key and that's important because the more the employee knows, the more that they can talk about, the more that they can, really brag about their organization. Or maybe they're like, you know what, I like what I heard from the policy and advocacy team. Maybe I can go to my manager and we can talk about how I can collaborate with that team to further my work on this team, right? There's a lot of things that can come out of those types of conversations. And making sure, clearly defined and communicated beginning and ends, right? So coming up with some type of timeline. People like the onboarding process is not a quick 1 week process. An onboarding process is at least almost 6 months. Because when you think about it, the employees, when they first come on, they're first, getting onboarded to the organization. So the company values, the mission, things like dress code, filling out paperwork, talking about benefits. Just getting benefits situated takes about 2-3 weeks alone if you're like me. But, those types of things I talked about. And then you go into the onboarding for the actual employee's department, right? So them meeting their boss, them having those conversations about expectations with their boss on a department level, them meeting their colleagues, them talking about the team culture and the team values and the team mission, them getting acclimated with their grant and knowing what their deliverables are. Then you're talking about if they're going to be working with community, them, getting acclimated with the community, how the community operates and meeting certain community stakeholders and liaisons. And so that whole process, and we haven't even talked about performance appraisals and all that good stuff. That whole process can take at least 6 months when we're talking about onboarding. So it's definitely something that is important that should be paid attention to ensure the successfulness of that new hire. Some core elements when it comes to onboarding: within the first week, identify new hire point of contact for the first day and the first week. Who is that person? Who is that person going to be that new hire can come to? Oh my gosh, I don't have a key fob. Who can I go to get my key fob? Oh my gosh, my internet's not working. Who can I talk to about my internet working? Oh my gosh, I got sick. I'm not going to be able to come in today. Who can I talk to about that, right? Schedule one-on-one meetings with HR representative and supervisor. The HR representative is going to be the person that's going to talk about pay, that's going to talk about benefits, that's going to talk about personnel policies, that's going to have you sign the employee handbook, that's going to make sure that they talk about, vacation days and the holidays that you're off and, the pay structure and all those good things, raises, etc. And then that one-on-one conversation with the supervisor, that conversation is going to be like, okay, well, what are your goals and expectations of me of your boss? And then what are my goals and expectations of you? What's the environment or the team culture or values that we have? Introduce new hire to entire organization, right? Again, going back to what I was saying before, having each person maybe one person from each department, come to the new hire orientation or, have that new hire schedule a meeting with one person from each department within the first few weeks of their start date to be able to have those conversations about what that department does, what their values are, any opportunities for collaboration, etc. Identify goals and expectations as well as deliverables and timelines, right? So, again, talking about goals and expectations, and then talking about what's the timeline of those goals and expectations. Are you required within your grant to test 300 people per year on unduplicated numbers, right? That's something that they need to know. That's something that should probably be talked about on the front end so they know that what they're getting into so they can be able to formulate a plan. Another HR tip that we have is keep in regular contact with your new hire to build rapport and feeling of excitement and welcome before their first day. So you've interviewed the person. You've sent the job offer. They've accepted. Yes, I'm making $250,000 a year. I accept this job. I have great benefits. I'm working for this amazing organization. I'm so excited, right? Making sure, and even though their start date may not be 2 weeks till after they've accepted it, making sure you stay in contact. So I'll use my organization for another example. When I first started, I was offered a position. But they kept in communication, right? They automatically set up my email. I started to receive their emails. I didn't have to respond because I wasn't a full employee, but stuff to keep me updated, right? Maybe if there was some type of organization event that was happening, or, maybe some type of, party or some type of conference, whatever the case may be. Just stuff to start making me feel like I was already part of the AU family, right? And then I started to receive all these emails from random people like, oh, my gosh, we're happy to have you on the team. Amazing. Oh, my gosh, we're happy to know that you're working for us. We've heard great things about you. Oh, my gosh, yay, right? All these celebratory responses and emails that came really makes the employees start to feel like they are part of the team, right? And it starts to engage them. And already they're thinking like, oh, my gosh, these are amazing people. They're very invested in who I am. They're very invested in what I bring to the team. They're very invested in just making sure that I feel welcome and as though I can go to anybody with any questions that I have. And that is very important. A clean new hire workstation and put up a welcome sign. Having a clean workstation, That is important. And some people don't know the importance. I'm sure if anybody on this webinar is a neat freak like me, to come to a workstation or a desk or an office where, I don't know, it's like cluttered, it may be a whole bunch of dust everywhere, my computer is kind of jumbled, it's not set up, right? It's just like, okay, well, I guess they didn't care enough about me to make sure this was set up, right? So just small things like that. And even a welcome sign, right? Make it a big deal that that employee has started, right? Make them feel excited. Have a welcome sign. Have balloons. Go all out. Have sticky notes that say welcome. Have stickers. Have candy, right? Just make them feel welcome. Make it a big deal that they are now on your team, right? Because that is going to make them feel special, and that's going to make them already feel as though, you know what, this organization, they care about me as an individual, not just what I can do for the organization, but as me as an individual. And then complete technology setup prior to first day, right? So you don't want to spend the first week of the employee being having started their position just working out technology issues, making sure they have a phone, making sure they have a laptop or a computer, making sure that they have, if you use iPads, make sure they have iPads. If you use work cell phones, making sure they have that. All those things should be set and ready to give the employee or set up for the employee from day one. So they're not wasting time, or they're not sitting around, or they're not able to be productive because they don't have the necessary things that they need in order to do their job. So we are now at the question and answer section. So I will turn this over to Sarah to pose, or not pose, but read any of the questions so we can answer some for you all.
Hi, actually, this is Kyle. If you have any questions, you can enter them in the bottom left-hand corner of your of the screen. So go ahead and enter them there, and we will. I will start asking any ones that we get submitted.
So as people are writing in questions, I do want to emphasize that this first webinar was just a brief introduction to the things that we're going to be talking about and the things we're going to be taking a deeper dive into. So it's really talking about that recruitment process, right, and what does that look like and what does that entail? All right, so that interviewing process, key reasons to do interviewing and even how to do interview, right? So we're talking about key interview questions to have. We're going to talk about job description. What goes in a job description? Where can you get a job description template? Right? We're going to talk about that onboarding process. We're going to talk about how long that onboarding process should be more in depth. What exactly should go in that onboarding process? What are some key activities that can happen during the onboarding process to make sure the employee feels welcome, right? We're going to even talk about, what are some do's and don'ts of all the functions that we're going to be referencing, right? We're going to be talking about how can you implement some of these HR functions, if you only have one person doing HR stuff and that one person also manages the program and does 25 other hats or wears 25 other hats, right? So those are all the things that we're going to be getting into as we move into Webinar 2. And Webinar 3 is going to be really cool because Webinar 3 was going to be like a live TA session. So Webinar 3, we're going to spend all of our time just you posing questions and us helping you walk through those questions and maybe even helping you walk through how to set up some of these HR functions. And then we can even talk about how can we do one-on-one TA with you all. So again, this webinar was just like a teaser. It was just like, this is what we want to talk about. And then Webinar 2 is we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into all this content. We're really going to, dig and dig and dig and really get to the specifics to make sure that you have the necessary tools as it relates to human resources to really function successfully.
Hey, Adrian, we just got a question coming in. Thank you so much for submitting it. This question says, you talked about the importance of key core questions. Could you talk a bit more about some questions you considered to be key to ask during the interview process?
I definitely can. So this is definitely something that we're going to talk about in webinar 2, but just some questions that I can give you now that should be asked during the interview. So questions like if you see on their application or their resume that they've had a huge gap in employment, talk about that, right? So just simply asking, so we noticed that, you know, in 2009, you worked at such and such, and then you got a position in 2014 working for such and such company. Can you talk to us a little bit about, you know, what you were doing in between those years, right? Making sure, because you, honestly speaking, transparently speaking, you want to know. Was it, you know, they decided to take some years off to explore the world? Was it whatever the case may be? Those are definitely things that you can ask. I would also talk about questions that you don't want to ask. So you don't want to ask anything that is around race, gender. So, for example, if you don't want to ask somebody if they're pregnant, right? You don't want to ask someone, you know, anything about their children or ask if they have kids, or, you know, be the first to bring up that conversation, because what can happen is that if you do not offer that person that position, what they can come back and say is, oh, I didn't get this job because I have children, right? And because they felt as though I was not going to be able to do my job as effectively because I have kids and I have to be home at a certain time, when the case may be. So those are the types of questions that you do want to avoid. Asking questions like, you know, again, as it relates to time management and organization, and asking questions about, you know, experience that's related to the job. So if you know that you are, you have, or the job is an outreach services specialist, communication is going to be very important, right? So talking about where's your communication skills, right? How do you communicate? What's an example of effectively communicating, right? Even talking about, you know, the escalation of conflict, right? And so, you know, in a conflict, how do you show up in a conflict with someone? And usually, or not usually, but some people may respond with, you know, first I try to handle the conflict on my own, and then I bring it to a supervisor if it doesn't get resolved, etc. But questions that get to, you know, how someone handles conflict, how someone handles de-escalation, how someone communicates, how someone effectively manages their time, how organized someone is, etc. But again, we are going to be talking about specifics. I'm trying not to give too much away. We're going to be talking about specific questions in webinar 2. So definitely, whoever asked that question, please attend webinar 2, and we'll definitely go more into that. Thank you for reading that, Teresa.
No worries. We're just going to keep the line open for a couple more moments so we can get a few more questions in. Okay, great. We just got one. Where are some good places to recruit based on population? Adrian?
Sorry, I had my phone on mute. My apologies. I was talking and had my phone on mute. Good places to recruit as it relates to population. So, you know, of course, it really depends, right? So if you're talking about Black gay men, so maybe recruiting to where, you know, they frequent. So maybe getting a hold of a community liaison or somebody who's a huge stakeholder, and then, you know, talking to them about where folks of that population hang out, right? Where do they frequent? Do they frequent a certain coffee shop? Do they go to a certain hangout spot within the city? Or do they use a certain website? people advertise for positions all the time in Facebook groups, right? So, for example, I belong to a lot of Facebook groups that are focused on Black gay men, where a lot of conversations are happening about our community and things of that nature, and there's also a lot of job postings that are there, right? So getting with that community liaison or stakeholder and, asking them like, hey, are there any social media groups that I can advertise this job posting in? Are there any hangout spots? Or maybe even going to the university, right? Going to the, if you are looking for those who belong to the LGBTQ population, going to that university and going to that LGBTQ resource group. Most universities have one, saying, hey, can I advertise this position within this resource center because I'm specifically wanting to hire someone of this community, right? So those are some key places. If you're looking for people of color, Columbus Urban League, posting resources there. Just really finding those key spots that people actually go to and frequent, and not just always relying on like LinkedIn, right? Because especially if you're hiring for a position where it's not all about the type of degree that you have, but it's also about that experience, or maybe it's less about the type of degree that you have, or less about you having the degree and more about experience. Where can you advertise where you're going to reach people that have experience with working with that community? And that's the question that should be asked. Now, if you're looking specifically, you're looking for somebody with a finance degree, et cetera, then maybe places like LinkedIn or platforms like that. But perhaps, if you're looking for individuals with experience in degree or just experience, looking at those community stakeholders or those hangout groups or those social media platforms like Facebook, et cetera, to be able to advertise on. But again, this is another question that we're going to dive a little bit deeper into in webinar 2.
Perfect. And we have one more. What if you can't formally offboard in the first week? For example, if a person is traveling or not local, how can one approach this and still be able to do effective onboarding?
Repeat that question for me one more time. I didn't hear the beginning part of it.
What if you can't onboard formally in the first week, meaning if the person is traveling or out of town, whatever the case may be, how can you approach this and still be able to do onboarding effectively?
So definitely. So let's say that employee was offered a job last Friday and they're traveling this week and won't be able to come into the office until next week. A simple response to that is, just moving all the onboarding things until that next week when they're able to actually officially, physically start their job. But something else that can be done is how can you engage that person, online, right? So, what emails can you send them? You can send them a welcome email saying, hey, such and such, welcome to the team, blase, blase, blase. Or you say, hey, AU staff, I just want to let you all know we have a new person joining the capacity building team. They'll be starting blase, blase. Please send a message or a note welcoming this person and doing things like that. Maybe the HR representative can be like, hey, I'm just going to send you some documents to look over, and then we can review them once you actually get here in person. So not saying, oh, review these things on your own, but just like, hey, just look over them for now, and then we'll talk a little bit more about them when you actually come into the office in person, right? And just doing things like that, maybe even sending them like a calendar of things that are happening within the office over the next month, right? So talking about, hey, next week we're having a luncheon. We would definitely like for you to join. This is what's happening. And here's some other future things that are happening within the next few weeks. And then maybe even finding some type of questionnaire that talks about, their favorite color or their favorite candy or the case may be, and that can even allow you to kind of have some of those things for when they actually get into the office, right? So if you're like, hey, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite candy or snack? Maybe you can have balloons in their office or in their cubicle with their favorite color and maybe have their favorite candy on the desk, right? So these are things that can keep the employee engaged, and it's non-traditional onboarding, but onboarding essentially is all about introducing the employee to the environment and the culture of the team or organization that they're going to be working for, right? And so if you're already doing those things, or you're doing those things online or virtually, that already lets them know, like, oh my gosh, if they can do this virtually, I'm not even there, or I can just only imagine what's going to happen and what the onboarding process is going to physically look like once I finally arrive in the office.
Thanks, Adrian. And then we have one last one. Sorry, just pulling it up. And, okay, who should be involved in the hiring process?
Awesome question. So this is definitely something that we're going to talk about in webinar 2, but right off the bat, some people that should be involved in the hiring process is definitely the HR representative, definitely the person's manager or supervisor. I would even say maybe one of the colleagues or employees that the candidate will be working with possibly, and then maybe a community stakeholder, right? And so I know some folks, and I do recommend this as well, they will actually have, let's say you have a community advisory board, right? So we all know a CAB, a community advisory board, are made of individuals who reflect the community, who reflect a certain community. And so maybe bringing one of them in to also end on the interviewing process, especially if the role is going to be interacting with community consistently and continuously, right? So making sure that they do community events, making sure that they're at community socials or gatherings or engage in community in certain ways. That will allow you to be able to get some type of feel of how that person will interact with community or how the community will feel about that person interacting with them. Now, of course, with this type of individual, you do want to make sure that it's just not, a random person of the community that you're just pulling off the street, right? You want to make sure that they have some investment in making sure that the organization has the best people working for them as possible, which is why, it's often recommended that you pick someone who is from your community advisory board, or if your board for the entirety of the organization is made up of, not only people who have some type of professional stake or investment, but who also have community investment, then that is also recommended.
Okay, great. That is the last question that we have. If folks have any more questions, they can go ahead and send them in. And if not, we will just go ahead and move on. Thank you so much to those who have submitted questions. Okay. All right. Well, some of the work that we do is providing technical assistance, and we work with two wonderful organizations, the Harm Reduction Coalition and the Bridging Group, and we offer free technical assistance and training to community-based organizations around the country. The services that we offer are a really large variety, everything from HIV prevention work to doing work with executive boards to really training members of the organization, in HR and things of that nature. So in order to receive this type of assistance, there's a couple of ways to do it. One, you could always send me an email. My name is Teresa Bediggy. My email is tbediggy@aidsunited.org. You can also email Siba at aidsunited.org for more information, or if you go on the AIDS United website under the Getting to Zero tab, at the top of the website, there is a form, a Google form for folks to fill out, and it asks a number of questions, name, address, but then it asks specifically what it is that you need help with. And I check that inbox every day, and I'm happy to respond and get back to folks as soon as possible with any information or any help, for sure. Adrian, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just want to say thank you for the folks that attended the webinar. Please, please, please attend webinar 2. Like I said, we'll be diving a little bit deeper into much of what was discussed today. And then the third webinar, we will be, having some live TA sessions. So please, please, please attend the rest of the webinar series. And thank you so much for attending this one.
Perfect. Thank you. And just a reminder that the second webinar will be tomorrow at the same time, 2 to 3:30 p.m. On the East Coast and 11 to 12:30 Pacific time. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much to everyone for participating. I'm going to hand this off to Adrian. It was a pleasure to work with y'all today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Teresa. And we look forward to speaking, or not speaking, but we look forward to webinar 2 and presenting some more information and key content to you all tomorrow. Thank you, and you all have a great day.
Thank you so much.